I'm Reisigo, and I've completed nearly 100 GameCube games, so I decided to compile a list of the 10 best GameCube games that I've completed during my journey so far. There's going to be a bunch of great games missing from this list, either because I haven't gotten to them yet or they just didn't make the top 10, but I want you to know that this list wasn't easy for me to make. I would be interested to know down in the comments what games you think will make this list in the future or should have been on the list now. I want to update this list every so often to see how my top 10 changes over time. These won't be listed in a specific order, just the games I think that are the best so far. If you find the slightest bit of enjoyment from this video, consider hitting the subscribe button. I focus heavily on the GameCube console, and I'll be continuing working my way through more games in the future, and I'd hate for you to miss out on that. We all know the reason you're here, so without further ado, let's start this list. I'm going to start this list with an honorable mention because it just feels wrong to leave this game off the list. Of course, I'm talking about Beautiful Joe, a difficult beat 'em up with fun mechanics and an extremely weird cast of characters. I love the visual aspects of this game being almost comic book-like, but at the same time actually being in a film. It's a super weird design. This doesn't fall on my top 10 because I like the game a lot, but I just wasn't very good at it. Meaning I struggled during large sections of this game, but I didn't want to take that away from the game just because I sucked at it, so I made it my one and only honorable mention for this list. If you haven't given this one a try, I would recommend it. I would say that the only weakness of this game is that the main story is somewhat weak in my opinion, so I'm curious of how they add to the sequel. Number 10, Metroid Prime 2. Metroid Prime 2 was a game that I wasn't sure if I was going to like going into it. I've never been a huge fan of the Metroidvania genre, and the idea of having to backtrack through areas I've already explored made me literally sick to my stomach. But once I started playing this, I was blown away. First off, this game holds up in the graphic department, being one of the better looking games on this list. The combat feels fluent, and the boss fights use the mechanics of the game to perfection. That being said, it wasn't always smooth sailing when I was playing this. I got lost a bunch of times and didn't really know what I needed to do. Or I would spend all my time focusing on collecting one specific item just to find out later on that I needed a new weapon or ability to actually get it. I think that's my inexperience with Metroid games more than the game's problem though. The story for this one kept my attention, but I didn't think it was the best story ever, but it definitely did what it needed to do. Since I haven't played the first Metroid Prime yet in the challenge, I'm curious how much I'll like that one compared to this one. I think if you like puzzle solving and interesting worlds, this is definitely a game to check out. Also, if you've never really played these games, then maybe try this one out and see if you like it. That's what happened to me. Number 9, Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes. Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes is a remake of the first Metal Gear Solid game on the PS1. So this gives us a step up in the graphics, but I also think it runs better in comparison. But someone that is more familiar with the PS1 version, let me know. This was a game series that I had never really played until this game, a series that always looked good, but something I just never got around to playing. I struggled early in this game learning the quirkiness of the stealthy gameplay, but once I got to the first real cutscene of the game, I was blown away by the storytelling, and just overall how weird the game was. I wasn't expecting to laugh out loud while playing a stealth game with a mostly serious story, but it was much appreciated. The characters in this game were so well written, and I loved learning about each and every one of them. I ended up really enjoying my time with this one, and now I want to play through the rest of the games in the series. It's nice to finally experience this game for myself and make my own opinion on it, but if you haven't played any of the Metal Gear Solid games, I think this is a great starting point. Number 8, Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is the first game on this list that I had previously played before this challenge, so this ended up just being a nostalgic ride for me. I remember playing all the early Resident Evil games up to Resident Evil 5, and then just falling off the series after that, so coming back to this one made me remember what makes them so good. The extremely over-the-top boss fights, having to save ammo and supplies, and of course hearing the merchant ask you, "What you buying?" every time we visited ended up making this experience so much better. The game struggles with some issues like the bad AI for Ashley, but throughout this playthrough, I didn't really have any issues with it. Since I played this as an adult this time instead of a kid, I think it was easier to just manage everything happening at any given time. I guess that's from adding all of them years of gaming experience to me. I think this game still looks very good for the time period, and I think this has to be one of the best horror experiences on the console. So if you haven't already, I definitely would recommend this one. Number 7, Baten Kaitos Origins. Wow, this one blew me away. Baten Kaitos Origins is a card battling JRPG, and it does such a good job combining the two things into a fun, in-depth, sometimes challenging experience. I really like games that use deck building to fight, and based on how the deck is built changes how you play the game. There's something about having a deck that gets you destroyed by an enemy, and once you go back and rework it, you're able to smash the enemy. It's just so satisfying. This is a very long game, taking about 45 hours to complete, depending on how much you do extra. Since this was my first time playing the game, I was trying to get all the cards, talk to all the characters, and just fully experience the world. JRPGs are my favorite genre of any video game, so this might be a biased pick, but I think this game does some really good things, and the story had me hooked from the early hours. I haven't played the first game yet, but I heard it's better than this one, so I can't wait for it. But if you want to play them with the story being in order, then it's best to start with this since it takes place first. I was so happy to see this game get remastered after being lost on this console for so many years. So if you like deck builders and JRPGs, like me, I would recommend giving this one a try. Number 6, Evolution Worlds. We've made it to the first game on this list that I think most people would disagree with me about. I have to start with the fact that I love the JRPG genre, so most games that fall into that category are just going to get more love from me. But for this one, I don't think it's the case of the genre, I just think the game is very good. I'm speaking of Evolution Worlds, 2 separate games in the same series smashed into one title and put on the GameCube. Where do I start with this one? First, I'll come out and say it, the story gets much better in the second half of the game compared to the first half, but I feel like that somehow lets the characters stand out more. The game has pretty limited dialogue outside of the main story parts, but it does a great job making each character feel special, and then just different. None of the characters are the same. The gameplay for this one is turn-based, but it's on a 3x3 grid. This allows for us to decide if we want to put out less damage, but then take less damage, or take more damage and put out more damage, based on where we line up each party member. We even have the option to use attacks and items to line up the enemies so that we can hit them all at once. This sets up for some crazy combos, and we can really use the strengths of our party members, meaning that there's kind of an element of strategy to the battle system. It's not a perfect game though, and I think it struggles with its presentation. The graphics feel a bit dated, and the large dungeons can feel old after doing 15 floors of a dungeon that look mostly the same. But for me, that's things that don't really bother me as a gamer, so I feel like Evolution Worlds deserves a spot in my top 10. Maybe this will change in the future, but for now, I'm sticking with this one. Number 5, Mario Kart Double Dash. If you know me at all as a person, you know I love arcade-style racing games, so you won't be surprised to see Mario Kart Double Dash on this list. What can I say about this game that hasn't already been said a million times on the internet? The courses are very good, and it's just fun to play. Tagging 2 Mario characters together can really make for some goofy combos. This is my second favorite Mario Kart game behind Mario Kart Wii, and anytime I boot this one back up, it always brings a massive wave of nostalgia crashing down on me. When completing this game for the GameCube challenge, I ended up 100%ing the game because I just wanted to play more of it. If you haven't figured it out already, I obviously recommend checking this one out and just giving it a try if you haven't done so. Number 4, Sonic Riders. The next game up was a surprise for me. I had never played Sonic Riders before, but I don't generally have a good track record with Sonic games as a whole, so I wasn't expecting much from this game, but after a few races, I absolutely fell in love with this one. The high speed of the races and the different character types makes for so many different ways to play this game. I am happy they included the story mode in this one, because that always seems like something that these racing games need, and some of them during this era just don't have one. It's just racing. Yet again, I love these arcade-style racers, and this one didn't disappoint. I even discovered that there's a very dedicated group of fans that keep this game alive. They set new records and host tournaments, which I don't think I'm good enough to win any of them, but I would love to compete in one of them someday. I think that would be really fun. Sonic Riders is the reason that I wanted to do a challenge like this. It's not often that you find games that you wouldn't think you would enjoy, and then after you play it, you just fall in love with it. It's the inner child peeking its head out, reminding me why I enjoy video games in the first place. So, without going on more and more about this, I just would recommend it and give it a shot. Number 3, The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures. Next up is a Legend of Zelda game that I hadn't played because I thought I needed to have friends to complete it. But with this one, they changed that and I could finally complete this one by myself. I'm a huge Zelda fan, so it wasn't surprising that I enjoyed this one as well. But I did find a few things about this one that I didn't really like, such as every level being its own thing, meaning that all the heart pieces we collect, all the rubies we collect, and items that we pick up, they just all disappear once we beat the final boss of that area and move to the next level. There's just something about this mechanic that just doesn't sit right with me. It feels so foreign in a Zelda game. Zelda games always feel like this massive adventure and everything we do feels important to the overall story, but for this game, it feels like we're playing a bunch of small individual adventures. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it just doesn't feel like a Zelda game. I don't know if that makes sense to everyone else, but that's just how I feel about it. With all that being said, this is a solid experience. I love the way the game looks, and the puzzles are fun and creative. I think this would either be extremely stressful or fun if I was playing it co-op, but in my opinion, I think most Zelda games during this era didn't miss, so I highly recommend this one. Number 2, Chibi Robo. I don't even know where to start with this one, but I can only describe this game as weird and unique. We play as a little robot that has battery life, so we need to make stops at outlets and recharge ourselves throughout the day. It reminds me of Pikmin in a weird way because we only have so much time each day to complete the tasks that we're working on. The idea is to solve the mystery of the robot in the basement and heal the wounds of a broken family. A family that consists of a grown man that is bad with keeping a job and having money, a grown woman that just wants some romance from her husband, and their daughter that thinks she's a frog. That's right, she thinks she's a frog. We can meet a bunch of other household items that talk and have their own missions, and they're all done really well. The game is simple on the surface, but there is so much charm to all the characters in the game. Some of the larger characters even get character progression as you play through it. These are the weird games that no one takes chances on in the modern times, besides like indie titles, so playing something like this was super refreshing. I feel like if this game released now, it would do really well with the modern audience. This game still looks really good too, and besides some of the animations, I think it aged super well. My only complaint about this game would be that sometimes I would just get lost when trying to find an item or knowing what I should just do next. So I found myself cleaning up to build my relationships with the humans in this game until I figured out what I was supposed to do. If you can find this game and have a chance to play it, this is the game on this list that I think should be given a shot because of just how charming everything is, and it will suck you in, I promise. Number 1, Lost Kingdoms. The last game on my list is the most recent game on this list that I've completed, so hopefully it's not recency bias. This is an earlier From Software game, so we get some interesting looking monsters that will battle for and against us, because this is another card battling game. In this game though, we have to go into each level with an already built deck, and we use the cards to clear out the other monsters and bosses as we collect stones to prevent the end of the world. We can find cards on each level, and at the save points throughout the level, we can add those cards to our current deck. If we didn't collect the cards during our current run, then we can't add them into the deck later. This goes hand in hand with a mechanic where if you run out of cards, then we just can't fight, and then you have to either quit out or fail the mission. That being said, this game actually turned out to be better than I remembered it. We can gain experience with our cards and transform them into better cards, so think of evolving them if this was other monster collecting RPGs. The graphics are the biggest letdown for this one, but I think they're good enough. You'll be able to play it, it's not like the worst looking thing ever. One thing that I really liked about this game is seeing early Dark Souls ideas sprinkled throughout this game. You can see it in the monster design and the difficulty, and kind of just the vision that they were going for. I don't think this one will be for everyone, but I think it deserves a top 10 spot, and I'm looking forward to playing the second game. So I would recommend this one, and if you do try it, let me know what you think about it. That concludes my list for the best 10 GameCube games I've played so far. As I mentioned before, I really want to make one of these every so often, so I can compare this list to a new list, and just kind of see how my opinion has changed on things throughout this challenge. If you made it this far into the video, consider subscribing for more GameCube content, like and share this video so that we can continue to grow the channel, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.